Hello, everyone. Welcome to the tour guide hackathon session. This morning, we'll only have a morning session. There will not be any afternoon sessions. So I'm glad you guys are all online, and there seems to be a lot of activity going on in the channel. So I will be going through all the questions one by one since last time when we were doing this streaming yesterday. So I'll go through one by one each question, and we'll try to tackle them in a timely manner. So I'm just going to be, let me just send a notification on the channel to inform everyone that we're starting now. So before we tackle today's questions that have already started coming into the Slack channel, yesterday we were speaking about fragments, and unfortunately I think there was some sound issue at the end where I think only my screen was being shown and there was no sound. So I'm going to go back on my explanation of fragments because that was also one of the questions that was asked, and together we're going to review the fragments and understanding how tabs can be used and discuss a bit the relation between an activity as well as the fragments and how both can come together. And then we will proceed further with today's questions because yesterday we were not able to complete the fragments part of it. So I'm going to be sharing my screen so that we can talk about fragments. So please let me know in the channel if you can see my screen now. And I'm hoping that you can hear me and see my screen. Okay, perfect. Thanks for confirming, Toma. So I believe, Toma, you had raised actually yesterday afternoon when we were about to finish the session on how to go about using fragments. So I'm going to be also going through an example to illustrate more how the whole tabs functionality works. And I'll be also sharing with you a link to an article on how to use the tabs. It's a great article on CodePath that we should, like when you have time, you can also look at it. It will give you more details in terms of how to use the tab layout in Android. So do have time, but I will go through the code with you and run a demo of the code. So I'll send you over the link right now. I can't find it. Okay, so let's get started with fragments, and I'm just gonna close all of this. And so yesterday when we were speaking about fragments, one of the key things and the difficulties, and as I go along, please don't hesitate to send me questions specifically in respect to fragments. Like if there's any part that you don't understand, please do try to let me know in the Slack channel what part you would like me to emphasize a bit more on. I'll try to be as detailed as possible in terms of the reason being of the fragments, how you are going to integrate them, first of all, as self-contained components, visual components, and then how you can then integrate them in your activity. But I may miss maybe some details that you might require. So in that case, if that is the case, so please do let me know in the Slack channel what part I'm missing, or some part that might not have been clear enough, and I'll try to explain that a bit better. So yesterday, when we were speaking about fragments, I told you that this went back to the time of Honeycomb, where the first Android tablets were being introduced, and Honeycomb was actually one of the, I believe, was the first version that was giving support for dynamic layout readjustment with component reuse, which are actually fragments. The reason, as you know, that when you are dynamically changing an activity, actually, that activity goes through a life cycle that we had seen yesterday, and the activity can get destroyed and then can get recreated. So while an activity has its own complete life cycle, and by activity I also include here the app compact activity that you can see and that I'm highlighting right now in the code, those activity classes are actually the same, and they have the same life cycle. However, fragments do not have the same life cycle. They are intertwined a bit with the activity life cycle, but they have their own life cycle. And I had given a link also in the channel to the fragment life cycle. So do review both of these life cycles because understanding this life cycle is going to be very crucial for you when you're going to do your development, to understand really when some parts of the data, when you want to refresh a certain part of your list or make a call to a service, it's very important for you to know at which life cycle callback you have to make your implementation to get the desired effect. So it's very important that you go and try to understand fully how these life cycles work, specifically how the life cycle of a fragment works, because like I said, it is a bit different because a fragment can be created and redestroyed without the activity that contains the fragments is ever destroyed. So, but I'll touch on this a bit more as we go through this example. So first of all, as I had mentioned previously, the fragment requires a fragment activity, okay? This is the base class that it also extends the base activity class, but then adds support for fragment behavior. However, we also saw that for support of older devices, and specifically for devices that are maybe not running the latest and greatest Android version, the Android team came up with a support library that gives the ability to backport all of the new enhancement and additions of different types of widgets and features to older devices. And that is done through the support library. Now, just while I'm at it, I'll just go and give you a bit more information on this, just in case that it's not clear for some people. You can see that in your compile directive here and your build.gradle, this is where you're importing your different libraries, right? And you can see here, for example, I'm importing in the support app compact library. I'm also importing here the constraint layout as well as the design support library. So you have many other support imports that you can do. So just remember that in case if you're using someday a library and you just cannot seem to import it, chances are that you might have forgotten to import it in your build.gradle. So do check that before trying to troubleshoot or do some more heavy lifting like reinstalling your Android Studio install or the like. So once that your imports have been sorted, you will require, like I said, a fragment activity. However, we also want to keep backwards compatibility with older Android versions. So app compact activity, which is the main class that you extend when you want to also make your application to be compatible with older versions, when they implemented this activity, they also made sure that this app compact activity class was also extending fragment activity, so that by default, in an app compact activity, you get a bit more than a regular activity, which does not have the fragment activity support out of the box, which the app compact activity does. Now, with that said, we'll now look at how do you go about implementing a tab layout with fragments. So I'm going to run the demo first to show you what it will be, and then I'm going to explain to you the different parts of it and how they are all brought together to work. So this is like a very basic app, and I just implemented the tab functionality here for the tour guide application. So at the place of these tabs, you could put your different attractions so that the user could navigate between these attractions to view the information on them. So to give you a bit more detail, like rather than having tab 1, tab 2, and tab 3, let's change these tab values, okay? And we will do that shortly. But before we get into all of this, let me explain to you at a high level the structure a bit of how this all fits together. I'm just going to quickly check on the channel to see if there are any questions pertaining to the session. So if there's anything that's not clear, please don't hesitate. Leave me a message on the channel. I'll try to switch back and forth between the channels to see if there are any concerns or questions that might arise while I'm explaining during the live stream. Okay. So the main activity, which is your main entry point here, as per what's been declared here in your app, in your Android manifest here, is your entry point. And here we're extending the app compact activity that also extends the fragment activity indirectly. So we're getting all of the fragment support out of the box in this main activity class right now. As any activity, we are setting a content view so that this activity can be associated to a certain view. So let's have a look at this view called activity main. In this activity main right now, in the designer, you don't see anything. However, if you look in the textual representation of it, we can see that from the support library, we have added 2 elements here. The tab layout, which will give us the ability to show tabs, as well as a view pager whose responsibility is basically to give you the capability to swipe and add screens. So this view pager enables to have multiple pages within this widget, and which are going to be correlated with the tab layout. Okay, so basic layout, tab layout, and the view pager. Okay, so let's go back to our main activity. So we start the main activity and we set the content view with this layout. We then get a handle to the view pager defined right here so that we can initialize it and set an adapter to it. Now remember, I'm just going to take one step back here to re-explain quickly that an adapter, this is a pattern that is true across the whole Android framework, where an adapter always provides the data to the element to which it is associated. So yesterday, as we were going through the list example with this associated adapter, if you recall, what we did was that we created a list view whose sole purpose, remember the S of the solid principles. If you forgot, you can have a view in the Slack channel to the link I posted for the solid principles. The principle says for S that each class should just have one responsibility. So the list view, the responsibility basically is to handle all the scrolling, the selection of the elements, etc., etc. So really anything has to do with the UI and the interaction aspect. The list view does not handle the data itself. It does not acquire it from an external source. It is just given the data. So we saw that the list view, to get the data, needed an adapter who would provide the data to it. Further, the adapter would also give as the data a view. So if you recall yesterday, the adapter was actually giving back a view item, a list item that we had created, and which contained the information about our different attractions. So in the same way, a view pager is also a view, just like a list view, and it is just handling one single responsibility. That is the paging aspect, the UI interaction of swiping from left to right and being able to display the contents of whatever fragment that might want to get displayed depending on whatever view page that has been selected at that point for the view pager. So the view pager does not know about what data it needs to show, meaning that it does not know what fragment it has to show. It knows that it knows how to swipe, but the content is not something that the view pager will go and fetch. It should be given to it. And once again, the element that gives the information to the view is the adapter. So we needed to create an adapter for this view pager to provide it its different fragment or pages, if you will. So the pages are under the form of fragments. Okay, so let's have a look. So we created a custom class called sample fragment view pager adapter. Okay, so let's have a look. So we created this custom class and we extended it with fragment pager adapter. Okay, so remember, this adapter is going to provide the data to the view pager. Okay, a view pager has pages. The page is actually a fragment. Okay, so the last part that we will have to see is how does, when the adapter plugs itself into the view pager and the view pager says, okay, I'm at this part, can you give me, depending on the position at which the view pager is, it will ask the adapter, can you give me whatever page you have at that you know at position 0, for example. And the adapter, in this case here, will create a new instance and provide that information. So let me quickly also relaunch the application and try to bring the two together to make it a bit more clear, if it's not still very clear for some people. Okay, so okay, there's apparently an issue with the presentation in terms of quality. Let me see the broadcast. I'm gonna stop my sharing, and I'm just going to quickly see if I can do something about the quality. I'm not sure in terms of. Let me just reshare my screen with you again. Can you please let me know in the channel if it's clearer now? Can you also please make sure that you have set. Can you? Can you also, just in case for those who missed the message on the Slack channel, can you just please make sure that you have selected the highest quality in the player? So I'm going to continue, but please let me know, because I just had a look in the options when I stopped sharing, and I did not see anything I could change to improve the quality. If this persists for a lot of people, then okay, so it's clear for you, Masulo. Okay, please, sometimes I know by default, sometimes it does not. There's a setting, Enzo. There's a setting, Enzo, in the player. Normally you have 120, 420, 720p, and you can change the settings over there. In the player, you'll see that, Enzo, there's like that screw icon for settings icon, and then I think that you can click there and you can set the quality. Actually, if I just click on my own here, like, see if you go here, for example, you should have here the quality setting that you can change in quality right here, auto. So actually, if I just click on my own, okay, and you can go here, like, and click on 480p or 720. You should have here the quality setting that you can change in quality right here, auto. Okay, so I'm gonna go back into the presentation. So of the fragments. Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna like do a comparison of the code and try to like show you what's going on. So I just really want this to be very clear for you guys, because this fragment part is very important for you to understand, because you'll be using it a lot actually, because fragments give you a lot of flexibility to make really to make you basically have flexible UIs and to be able to reuse components a lot. So if you recall, right, the list view from yesterday, the list view actually, and just like the view pager, they keep track of where they are. Okay, so right now, as you can see, I'm scrolling the screen, right, of the app. This is the view pager, okay? So when I launch the app for the first time, it's tab 1 that is selected. So internally, the view pager knows that this is, for example, position 0, okay? When we swipe like this and we go to tab 2, or if we were on tab 1 and we clicked on tab 2, in both cases, internally, the view pager now incremented its index, okay? It's indexed to 1 now, okay? So 0, 1, 2, okay? So generally speaking, in a lot of programming languages, and specifically also in Java, array indexes start at 0, okay? And lists generally also start at 0. So this is element 0, index 0, index 1, and index 2, okay? So it's not, you see 3, but it's index 2, okay? Now, what happens? Please just let me know if you don't understand this. It's very important that you understand this concept. Once you've understood this, it will just be a breeze to understand the overall patterns of also of other views that have lists and the likes, because the concept remains the same. The underlying concept is the same. So we hooked up the view pager from the main activity, right? We brought it in from the layout, and now we're showing it. The view pager is right now with its index at 0. Great. As I told you, single responsibility, the view pager does not have its own data. It asks for its data. If we go back to the main activity on the left, you can see that we set the adapter, i.e. data provider for the view pager here, sample, fragment, pager view adapter, view pager adapter, okay? Now, we go back here. The view pager adapter, when you are going to extend the fragment pager adapter, it will make you override 3 important methods. Get count to say how many overall tabs are there, okay? How many pages basically you want to show. The other very important method is the get item. This actually will return the page that the view pager will have to show. So coming back here on the right, when the view pager is showing the tab 0, so index 0 for the view pager, it's very important that the index comes from the view pager, not from the adapter. Because you can see it here. This is the adapter, right? The adapter is given the position, as you can see. The position is basically just the index at which the view pager is. So right now, position is 0. Position now is 1. Position now is 2, okay? So when we were here, the very first time when we run it, position 0 is passed into this element, into this method. That's the value that's passed to the method 0. So at this point, the view pager, if it could speak in English, it would say, adapter, give me the data source, sorry, from your data source, give me the data element that I should be showing for my index 0. So the adapter executes and says, okay, for position 0, I'm going to give you a page fragment, okay? Remember, we are in a fragment pager adapter, so what will be returned is a fragment. So here, if we go and look at now the page fragment extends fragment, okay? That's the base class that you should be extending. Now, one other caveat I'm going to explain and I'm going to reiterate from yesterday, basically, which is important. It's very important that you always keep track that when you are dealing with the support library, i.e. app compact activity, whenever you are using, and most likely now you will always be using app compact activity unless you just want to support the latest and greatest version of Android and you want to forget about all the older devices. So generally, you will always be using app compact activity to have the highest compatibility. And in that case, you have to make sure that when you're working with fragments, that you are always using the fragment that's coming from the support package. Okay? Very important. Otherwise, you will have a very weird error message that you might not understand exactly immediately why this is happening. Okay? You cannot mix and match fragment from the non-support package with adapters or other elements from the support package, right? It has to be one or the other. So here, we saw that the view pager as the fragment, hey, can you give me the fragment page? So we created a page fragment, which itself is the fragment, okay? So this represents a page. So what do we do here? We say new instance, we pass in the value of the index, which is 0 plus 1, so that is 1. And that's why you see tab 1 here, right? So the position is 0. This is automatically provided by the view pager. We go into the new instance, we get the value of the page. So in this selection on the right, value of the page is 0. We put in the value of the page in the bundle. We create a new page fragment, which is a fragment. We add the arguments to the fragment, okay, which is just the page number. Recall that we had added the value of 1 to it, right, when we created it. So right now it's 0 plus 1, and we return the fragment here, okay? Now, also, the fragment, the key method in the fragment is that the fragment will be requested to draw itself when the page view will draw itself. So for that, the onCreateView method is called for the fragment. And the way this works is, if you recall from yesterday, when we were looking at the list view, we saw that the list view had also, we had to specify a specific layout for the list item, right? So the list item would be each entry that we would see in the list. We had to define that custom list item layout. So we had just made a very simple text saying just the name of the attraction. And in the same fashion, the fragment page that we return should also declare a layout of its own, which here is the fragment page. So in these last steps, when we have defined our page fragment that will be returned to from the adapter to the view pager here by calling new instance, to when this fragment will be returned, then the view pager will call the onCreateView of this fragment, and then this method will be called, and here we're going to go and get that specific layout for our page, okay? We're going to go and get the text view that we declared in it, and we're going to add that value of fragment and the number of the page, okay? And that's how all this thing basically comes together. So the final touch here is just to add the tabs. So we saw the view pager functionality, how the adapter will give the view pager its pages, i.e. fragments. We saw how we declared the fragments and how we defined the onCreateView of the fragment, that when the view pager instantiates a fragment, it calls the onCreateView and gets the view that it must show. Finally, for the tabs now, we use the tab layout. And here in the tab layout, we specify so that the view pager and the tabs can be in sync, right? So that when we are clicking on tab or moving or selecting another tab, the view pager knows that it has to shift its index to be in sync with the tab. So finally, the tab layout is given the view pager. And that just creates you the layout that we saw. Now we're going to do one other thing to give you a bit more color. We're going to just name, it's a very simple. We're just going to change the names of our tabs. So remember from our examples of when we were going through the requirements yesterday, I took the example of some attractions in Paris. So I'm just going to reuse these. I'm just going to write 3 of them, okay? And I'm just going to rerun this, and you'll see that the names will come here. So this, for example, could have been one of the ways that you could have implemented, let's say, in your layout for your application for this tour guide. You could have like shown here, for example, your like if I was writing this for the project, I would then show maybe the Eiffel Tower picture here with maybe the description then of the business hours and things like that. And same thing here, then users could be able to swipe like that. Okay, great. So I'm just going to come back now to the questions here, if there are any, and I'm just going to quickly see. Okay, so let me know if this explanation, Toma, I think you were the first one, you were the one who asked me about the fragments and how they all fit together. So let me know if this was clear enough or not. And if there were some points that were not, then let me know and I'll try to re-explain those. So I'm going to quickly go through the questions if I had missed any. By the way, if I do miss a question and if you see you ask me something and I'm coming back to it, please don't hesitate to maybe send me a message saying that, hey, could you please see if you can answer my question. Okay, so it is recommended to create a fragment list with which auto create a recycler view adapter and dummy content. If yes, can you please explain how we can set dummy data? Okay, so first of all, I'm not going to touch on the recycler view because the recycler view is a new view. It's definitely a better view to use compared to the list view because it has some advantages that the list view does not have. The list view, as per what the Android team said who made this list view, said that it was quite convoluted. So they started from scratch, created a recycler view, which would have a much more pluggable architecture in which you could much more easily set transitions, animations and effects, as well as having a more modular way to mix and match different layouts within a same list, which was maybe not easily doable in the list view. However, I know that up till now in your project, you are not supposed to use the recycler view. You can just use the basic list view. And like I said to you, the recycler view actually has a bit more elements to it. You have to create holders, you have to create a specific adapters and more specific layouts. So I'm not sure what Cassie, what you're asking in terms of, I unfortunately do not want to go on to content that's not part of this project. But in terms of dummy data, if you can just maybe repost a question or maybe assess your question in the channel, I could maybe better understand that. Okay, so tree fragments. I have errors on my visit fragment. I do not understand. Okay, so let me have a quick look here. Array list location, okay. Locations add. So what I see from that screenshot that you just posted, for me, it's like you've created an array list of the location object type, okay, and you're adding a new location, and your location apparently is taking a list of integers, because when you're using rstring.visitName, although no, this must be a string value. So your constructor is not properly formed in respect to the values that you're passing in. So what is the Ryoko-san, what is the the output in the error log, like below in your IDE. So the thing is, you're saying that it matches int, 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 but are you sure that that value is actually returned as an int and not a string? Because I see that you're not using ID, but you're using string, right? So if you did r.id, something that might have returned you an integer of that element. But if you click on r string directly in your code, right? If you click, for example, the first element, you will be able to maybe see if that in the R file, if that value is actually an int or a string. So in this screenshot, you have a fragment activity, whereas it was expecting context. And here it says Java util array list. And if you look at the package, right? The package is com example Android tour guide, whereas the one that the code is expecting, right, is Android location location. So that's a class, but the package is Android location, right? So you need to maybe adjust your package in the method in which you're passing in that value. I think that you have a package problem here. Ryoko-san, can you like have a look at your package? Well, you can just change that in your imports, right? I mean, and the declaration. If you have a GitHub link, if you can send me the GitHub link, I could just clone your project, import the project, and just see what the problem is. So Enzo, I think that you are apparently having trouble with one of those applications to create different densities for your resources, I believe. I think that was one of your questions. So I think that Matt had explained to you how to like, were you not able to use that the 9, I think it was a 9 image view patcher application to create the images? Are you still having the problem with that? Well, apparently, like Matt had said it, right? You have to, once you download the application, the jar, right? You have to open a shell and you have to run that command he had written, Java minus jar and the name of the jar, right? And that will bring up a UI, and all you have to do, if I can show you, I can try. I haven't personally used this application, but hey, I can definitely give it a shot. So let me see. So if I download this application here, so that is the executable. Right, so you see this is the jar, right? So I'm not on Windows, so I cannot use this executable. I'm going to use this one right here. So I'm going to save this file. And so I'm going to go and open the shell here. So maybe here. Excuse me. So here, I've just downloaded and I brought this in. So I'm using Java minus jar resizer. So you have this application now that is running, okay? And I believe that as per what also Matt was saying, you can select here the different output densities that you want, right? So for example, in this one, I would be skipping the very, very high HDPI density of my image resources, and I would just be giving this output. Now you would also need to specify what is your input density, right? So recall what I told you guys, right? I told you that, okay, I told you that, let me just close this and come back. I told you that always try to first make one resource file that is the highest density. So preferably nowadays, if you look at the more high-end Android devices, they are having maybe now almost XXX HDPI level density level. So recommendation is to go, I think this is 500 and something DPI numerical value. So create your images at this density level. Once you have created your image, so the original image that you create has to have this type of density, XXX HDPI, okay? Once you have done that, then you could come to this application and select here XXX HDPI. You have to tell it what are the incoming files input density. This is what it is. So you have to come here first, select what was your input density. So preferably go with the highest, and then you're going to ask him what are the output densities you want to create. So you would not have to select this one, for example, because obviously you are already providing that as input, right? So you don't need that as an output. However, you will need the smaller density. So then you just select the different smaller densities, and then I guess you just drag and drop that one resource here, and you just click save, and in the output it would create you all of these. And then all you have to do is just go and copy and paste them, basically, if I'm not mistaken. If this application works, that is. Okay, I think this is the way that this application works. Once again, I personally haven't used it, but I think that's how it would work. I hope that answers your question, Enzo. So if you're on Enzo, if you're on Windows, then obviously you would have to. Yeah, so the link was right here. It was the one that Mag gave. So this is the link, right? So there are just multiple releases. So take the one that's the most at the top, at the first top one. Just use that one. And if you're on Windows, if you look at my screen right now, you would want to then download the exe, not the jar. You'd want to download the executable. But for those of you who are watching, if you're on Linux like me or on Mac OS, it will work the same way. Get the jar, okay, and then run the command like I ran it here with how I ran it here with Java minus jar and then resizer jar. Okay, and so you could also run it this. You could also run the jar if you want on Windows. It would work also. Okay, so Ryoko-san, are you still having a problem then with that ID? Okay, so I'm not getting an answer, so I'm just going to go back to the next question, which I believe was Thomas' question, saying, can you overview more about logic of using and navigating between those lists using intents and multiple activities or a view pager? Okay, and also creating your own custom classes in context of tour guide and specification. Okay, that is that's a very loaded question. That's a very loaded question. But yeah, I can definitely try and going back with the rubric again and um, and see what I can do for you on that. Ryoko-san, can you? Is there any way I can? No worries. Is there? Do you have a GitHub link? Can you give me a GitHub link where I can clone your project so I can run it as it is right now? If you can just commit and push your changes as they stand, then I could maybe just clone your repo, run it right now, and see what the problem is. Because if I look at your one of the if I look at one of your this screenshot that you posted, right? You can see in red here. Look, in your array list declaration, okay, you have put in you're using the location object of the Android SDK. So there's a class in the Android SDK that is also called location. Now you have created also a class called location, which is in com example Android tour guide, okay? Now there's a mismatch between these two location objects. So when you're putting in that array list into that method, the location package is not the same. So I don't know if you've corrected this or not. Okay, so let me go here. Let me just clone this quickly. So let me clone this. I'm going to go here. So I'm here. Okay, so let's clone this. Okay, so let me now open this. Okay, so let me import now your code and see in test tour guide. Okay, so this is normally your app. New window. So let's go to 6. I'm going to install this quickly. So for those of you like watching also, like try to follow along because you might also have this issue at some point. So it's always good to know how what the problems that other developers are facing, because at some point, it's a circle, right? It all comes back also to us. So if not today, then tomorrow you might also be facing the same kind of problem maybe. And then it's always good to kind of see how to resolve things. So fail to resolve constraint layout update plugin to. Okay, so let's update it. Why is it not? Again. Okay. So okay, so let me see where your location. It seems to be all in the view package. Where is the... Hey, Ryoko-san, I'm sorry, but could you tell me which class you were having this issue in, please? Yes, absolutely, Matt. I can touch on that, no problem at all. Ryoko-san, can you just share which class you were having trouble with this? So that is the other. So was this one of your class? No, this is for the other application. I think that. Oops, I'm looking at the wrong here. Because I'm looking at your code right now. Visit fragment. Okay, let's have a look. So it's could you push in your latest changes, please? I don't see. I have an empty class here, fragment rather. Can you just do a commit and then push? Don't forget to push. If you don't push, I won't be able to get it. Yeah, so can you, that's construction line location. Well, at least, I don't know if you're following here. So visit fragment for me, as you can see, is empty. And location, where is location? I don't see, and I don't have location either. So, okay, let me do a pull. I'm on the master branch. Are you pushing this on the master branch? Or should I use, which branch should I be using here? I'm on the master. Okay. So fragment branch. Okay. Okay, this is good, much better. So if I go into visit fragment, I see, okay. So cannot resolve constructor location int. That's fine. So if you go into your location here, so you see that this location that you're using, this is what I'm telling you, right? This is not your class. Your class is right here, okay? Your location class is right here. But what you are using is another location class. This is not your location class. This is an Android location class. If you look at this import statement, right? You're using location of the import. This is what I was telling you. So what you need to do here, right, is you need to say com example Android tour guide location, right? And this should resolve your problem as it did here. Okay? You just, because you are using the same name of a class that existed, you are importing the wrong location class. So hopefully this should move you forward. Okay, so did you get that, Ryoko-san? Okay, Matt. Yeah, no problem, Enzo. You're very welcome. Matt, okay, so by the way, what we can do is I just need to go drink some water, if you don't mind. And we're going to take a 10-minute break. We're going to come back at 10 past noon. And I'm going to continue with your question, Matt. Okay, so just to before we part for the break, you would like to talk about how to debug an app that is compiling but crashing once on target. Okay, I can definitely show you how to do that. Absolutely. So it would be even better if you can give me a link to your, for example, GitHub where your application is, failing, so I can then run it on my machine and then put a debug point, and then I can show you how I would debug it. Yeah, no problem, Ryoko-san. Like generally speaking, your error message, like I was saying, was giving you different package names. So always be mindful of that. Okay, so folks, I'm just gonna pause the broadcast here. I'm gonna let it go. It's 12 o'clock here almost, and I'm going to go. I just have just quick a drink of water, and just take a break. And I'll be back in 10 minutes, and we're going to continue, and we're going to look at how to debug an application. Absolutely, Barenda. I'm sorry if I skipped your question, but absolutely. Okay, sure, Matt. So what I'll do is I'm gonna take a break now. Come back in 10 minutes. I'm gonna show you guys how you can debug on the device. Okay, and we're gonna take the example of the maybe the tab application that I was using earlier to show you the fragments, and then we're just gonna create some maybe bogus put some bogus data in it, and then I'm gonna show you how we can debug so that which is very very helpful. So absolutely, it's a good question, Matt, and I'm definitely gonna show you hopefully how to do that. Okay, so I'm just gonna pause my stream, and then I'll be back in 10 minutes, guys. Okay, so see you in a bit. Stay tuned. All right, folks, we're back. So we'll just continue from where we left off in terms of debugging an application. So let me quickly share again my screen so that, okay, so we're going to be touching on, Matt was asking if we could have an example of how we would like debug. And I can definitely try to show that. So there are two ways to basically debug, or rather, there are two ways. So if you're, so I just want to make, before I go further, I just want to make sure that the stream is visible and I can just quick check. Can you please let me know if you can hear me and you can see my screen? Because otherwise I'd be just like maybe talking again, you know, by myself. And I would like to avoid that if possible. So can you let me know in the channel, please? Anyone? Like, can you see my screen and hear? All good? Awesome, let's do this. Okay, so debugging, very important concept. Thanks for the question, Matt. And we are going to see how this works. So right now, as you can see, I've just got the tour guide application here, and I don't have any emulator running, so we're going to start one in debug mode. So if you look at your taskbar right here, amongst these options, you have these three buttons right here, where you can run the app, you can deploy active changes that are done when the emulator is running, and then you have this debug icon right here, right? So we're going to click there. If your debugger was already running, then obviously it would not launch it. So this is one option to start your application in debug mode. Now, obviously, what I did not do here is I did not put any breakpoints. So the application will run, but it would not stop at basically at any point because I haven't put a debug point. So how do you put a debug point? So debug point is basically a point where you want to stop in your code to figure out the execution from that point and onwards, and then you can see the state of your variables and things like that. Okay, so let's have a look at how that is done and what it looks like. So for example, let's say that I would like to see how this get item is called, for example, when I click on my second tab here called Louvre. Okay, so I'm going to put a breakpoint here. How do you do a breakpoint? Two ways. You can click here directly, left mouse click, and that will put a red breakpoint here. Or you can just do a right click. Actually, no, on this option, I don't have it here. So you can just do a left click here. Now, one other thing you can do further also, I'm just going to quickly touch on this just so that you can further actually add conditions on your breakpoint here by doing a right click and set, like, for example, you would only want to, let's say, stop here, like you would want the code to break here at this breakpoint only, for example, if position was equal to 2. So in that case, it's only when we would select lat and quarter, the code would stop here, the debugger would stop here. And why would you want to do that? Well, typically speaking, let's say you're getting this edge case where you're looping through, let's say, 100 items in a list. So let's say you were showing a list here rather than these tabs. And for some obscure reason, your code always breaks when you scroll and you get to the last element. So you're not like sure why this is happening. So obviously, if you're in a for loop or you're looping through the elements in your list, scrolling through, you would not want to like scroll breakpoint, right? You just want to go to the last element and breakpoint there. So potentially you could just put in a condition here to say, okay, when I get to the length, like the last position, around 99, then I want you to start breaking. So it just speeds up the process. So that's one example. There are countless others, but this is just good for you to know that you can add a condition here, which is quite cool. Okay, so I put in the breakpoint. Now, it might work immediately, or I might have to stop and restart the debugger with my debug points. Normally, it should just work. So I put in the debug point here now, and we're right now in the sample fragment manager. I'm going to try to see if I can just move this little bar onto some other workspace. So bear with me 1 second. Okay, cool. So we have the sample fragment view pager adapter here, and we want to. So remember, right? The view pager does not have data. It asks the adapter that was provided to it, hey, when I move, as per whatever data that you have, right? The backed up data that you're using will give me the position 1 now of that data source. So when I'm going to click here, you can see that the code stopped here. So I'm just going to move the emulator out of the window so that we have a bit more space to be able to see the full variables and other things. So I'm just going to move out of this workspace the emulator. Okay, it's still running, it's still there, but I'm just going to move it out. Okay, now right now we're in the breakpoint. You can see this with the highlighted line. Okay, and you can see that also one of the great things that Android Studio or IntelliJ, if you will, gives you is this access, this ability to actually go and inspect the contents of objects and go down into method calls. Okay, so for example here, one of the great things is they can already see what the position is. So recall, right? Let me quickly go back to the emulator here and try to refresh this to. Okay, so remember, right? First position was 0, and we were adding 1, so this would be 1. Then this would be position 1, but we're adding the value 1, so this is 2. So if you come back here now, we are at position 2, okay? So let's see how the fragment object is created. Now, I'm going to drill down into this method call. So you have these buttons here to be able to do that. So depending on if you want to go inside and continue down the call chain and see how the values are being initialized, you can now go. We can do 2 things here. Basically, I can just immediately return from the breakpoint and say, okay, just return the fragment, or I want to say, no, I want to go inside now and continue seeing, because maybe the problem that we're trying to debug, it happens at a lower level. So in that case, obviously, you would want to stop at a higher level to be able to then step by step go down at a deeper level until the problem occurs, right? Because of course, if you put a breakpoint that is happening after the exception, then you would never get the breakpoint because the code will bail out before you even got there. So for example, typically, if one day you have put like some kind of breakpoint, let's say I put a breakpoint here, right, or even this breakpoint, and I would have clicked for the required action, right, to fail, and it would fail, and I would see that my debugger did not, I never stopped the breakpoint. There might be 2 reasons for this. There can be maybe more, but 2 main reasons would be, or there's no debug session, meaning that there's a disconnect between the IDE and your emulator. So maybe try that. If there is no disconnect, that would mean that basically your breakpoint is never reached. It means that the failure is actually happening at a higher level and you're at too deeper of a level in the call stack. So for example, here, to put this in perspective of what I just said, if I knew that the problem was happening in this page fragment here, let's say I knew that the problem was happening here when we create the new page fragment, because I could see that in the exception log, and I'm going to show you how to see the exception log also. But if I knew that in the exception log the problem was somewhere around here, then obviously at the last point where I could put a breakpoint would be here, right? It wouldn't make sense for me to put the breakpoint here. Okay, so in this example, this is quite easy. It's very straightforward because it's a simple example, but for sure that in more complex applications, and as you guys will learn more and more how to do more advanced things in Android, and you'll write more complex applications, sometimes it will not be that evident that a certain call is being made later or before or after. So that's why if for some reason one day you put a breakpoint and you realize that, hey, the breakpoint never kicks in like it has kicked in here, that certainly means that or your debugger is disconnected, or simply that you're at a too low level in the call stack. you should just try to go at a higher level and put the breakpoint a bit earlier, and then manually go into the point where the failure happens. Okay, so I hope this was clear. Now, how do we go inside and follow the call stack? So you have 4 buttons here, right? So if I hover over them, right, you have this one that says step over, F8. Okay, that's a shortcut. That means basically that right now we would not want to go into this method. We would just immediately return, and we would just skip all of the methods and return immediately from every method call. Okay, so that's this one. Now, step into would mean that no, I want to go down inside. Okay, so this is the one we're going to use. Okay, so we're going to use this one. And what's this other one? Is 4 step into. So I'm not sure when I would use this personally, because generally speaking, I'm not too sure. I personally never have used it. I use both of these two, the F8 and the F7, step over and step into a lot. I don't want to give you incorrect information, so I would have to look it up. So, or you can look it up in your own time and see what would be the reason why we'd want to use this. Okay. And step out, this is also once you are already inside a method, this can have the same effect as actually step over. Step over would be you just skip the method. If you say step out, because we're already at the return statement, this right now, if I called step over or out, it would have the same effect. But let's say there were like 5 more lines here, and I was at the first statement and the return was much lower, I could immediately not have to go to the return. I could just immediately come out. So that's when you would use, say, step out. Okay, so let's go into this method. And now you can see that we're inside the code of the pager adapter. So at this point, this is not what I want to see, right? I want to see the code of the new instance, right? So there are 2 ways to do this. Or I can continue going through this code, or I can now use the step out, because I'm not interested by the boiler or the SDK code. I'm more interested by my code. So I can just say step out of here, okay? And I can just keep on stepping out until I get to the point where I get to the instantiation of my fragment. So I'm just going to keep on stepping out until I get to that point where it might be the case also highly that I've now actually I went beyond that point. So that's why it went out of it. So I'm going to try another thing. This happens often because like I said, the code sometimes is very complicated. There are many callbacks happening and things like that. So if I wanted to go into the pager view adapter now, I could keep my initial breakpoint that I have right now. So if I'm lost, let's say if you're lost and you want to find your breakpoint, there's a very handy shortcut. You can press Control-Shift F8, Control-Shift F8, and you can press this. When you press it, it will show you all your different breakpoints with a preview. So it's quite helpful. So if you have like lost your marker, if I may say, then you can just quickly see where it was, and you can just click there. You can double click it, and it'll bring you back to where that breakpoint was. So when we went inside this, I think what happened was that it just completely went into the creation of the fragment. So when we got there, it initialized the fragment and we just went over it. So just to make sure of how I would be able to see what's happening in the new instance class, I'm going to force, I'm going to put a breakpoint here so that I really want to go inside here, and I want to make sure that it will stop here. So I'm going to go back to my debug, to my emulator now. And I'll have to do it again because right now the code is not stopping. It went over that. So I'm going to click here again, come back to my code here. So if I go back, so I would have to do that again. So let me come here. Okay, so I'm going to go back to Eiffel. So from Louvre, I'm going to go back to the Eiffel. And now I'm going to go to okay, so I think what has happened now, I have lost my debug connection here, because if I go, see that there's no more breakpoint being triggered. So this will happen. It will happen to you. It's quite sometimes it just disconnects. So the way to reconnect is the hardcore way, which I do not recommend, is of course you stop the emulator and you restart it in debug mode. That's overkill because you have to wait and wait for it to restart. Another button that you have that's very important here is the attach debugger to Android process. Okay, is this icon right here with that green little bug on the phone. Okay, on this rectangle. So if you click on that, it will show you a pop-up and it will show you your running application. Okay, so there you just select that application, you say okay, and this normally will reattach your IDE back with the with your emulator. So now, if I click here, it should have. So let me go back. Okay. Why I think I've lost. Okay, so let me do this again. Back here. Okay, so I'm going to attach the debugger right here. So the tour guide application. And I'm going to say OK. Now the breakpoint is on get item and is also okay. And it's also here, which is fine. Okay, for some reason, I don't know, maybe demo effects. So let me just restart it in debug mode. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead like that, click that. And now if I click here, it will stop. And actually what happens, interestingly enough, so it first stopped actually at new instance. So it's creating the fragment first, right? And then it's getting the item. So, and this is a very good example because this illustrates a bit also like maybe it was not stopping here because absolutely this actually call was happening much earlier in the call stack than I had thought, right? So this is actually a very good scenario of also why, like if your breakpoint is not occurring, then chances are that wherever you're putting the breakpoint is maybe too late or too early, depending on, well, it can never be too early, but can definitely be too late. So here I can now step over these elements. So if I want to now go from line to line, if I press on step into, I'm going to go into the new bundle. That's not what I want to do, right? Here, what we want to do is that we want to go up to, let's say, for the sake of argument, we want to go up to the point where the page fragment is created and we're setting the arguments. Let's say the bug was happening here. So there could be two ways to do this. You could quickly jump from here to here by putting another breakpoint, and I could just say skip, right? I could just say F8 here and say step over. So it will just step over all of this and just jump here. That's one way of doing it. So if there are too many lines, you can do that. Or if you know that from this breakpoint, you want to go to another breakpoint that will come much later on and you can't be bothered to keep on clicking F8, 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 then you can just go to that other location, put a breakpoint and just say step over, and it will just jump to you. If the next breakpoint is that one, then we'll just jump straight to it. So here, just to also show you how we can incrementally go to breakpoint to break from line to line, you just click on F8 here, and we'll just keep on going from line to line. And let's say I knew that the bug was going to be happening at this point, then you could be, I'm going to move again this emulator out of the way, and you could see then, for example, like you could inspect potentially the state of your fragment. So let's say if it was set arguments that was failing for whatever reason, then you could evaluate that. Is this fragment null at this point? You could potentially maybe even go into page fragment, but page fragment, if we went inside it, chances are that it might just create. So let's have a look. So I could go step into F7 here, and you see that we're getting here. We have a breakpoint here, so it should potentially stop here. So we'll see. I can just click on F8, and then you saw that actually it skipped completely this the instantiation of the page fragment at this point in here, because what I'm, or actually no, because I'm already in the file. Never mind what I'm saying, because I'm already in here. So it's creating the page fragment right here, and then we're going to be putting in the arguments. And if there was a bug here, well, you could evaluate. If there was a problem in the arguments, then you can just like click on the arguments and see what's inside it. Then let's say, for example, if the parcel data was null, then, and it shouldn't be null, then you would know that what the problem was. And then you can just troubleshoot it this way. And then if you kept on pressing F8, we would get to the last line. And if we pressed F8 again, which would be, you know, step over, we would go back normally to whatever was the method called the new instance here. So that would bring us back here. And then obviously this would go back to the view pager. And then I guess we would lose ourselves here because it would just go back into the, yeah, into the, like the Android framework. And this is, you can see that this is the code of the Android framework of how the view pager works and everything like that. So yeah, so this is like a really, you know, a very quick overview of how, you know, you can activate debugging and how you can use it to maybe debug. And sometimes it does happen. Now, one thing I like mentioned to you earlier was the logging aspect of it, right? So I'm going to stop the debugger here 1 second, and I just want to show you how that would work, for example, to give you a bit more value in terms of understanding how you would see logging. So let me, how could I, okay, so let's say that hypothetically speaking, if we go into the page fragment here, we would like to see also, sometimes in an old-fashioned way, you could also like want to make sure what was the value, let's say, of, let's say, what was the value of the page here? Okay, so we were retrieving the page value from the bundle, you know, the arguments that were put into the fragment, and we would like to make sure that because we don't know why the values are incorrect or whatever reason that is, right? So we could create a log statement here. So I'm just going to say private final string tag. Okay, and I'm going to say here log, let's say a debug level tag. This is a log for the page number, okay? I'm just going to put the page number here. But sometimes, you know, obviously this is a very simple example, but the idea is like if you were using a more complex object and for some reason you were getting some null values for some of the fields of the Pojo or something else, then, you know, you'd want to see that in the logs. But obviously when this is running in debug mode, you can also see the logs from the log monitor, so we can see that. So this has nothing to do as per se directly with the emulator, but one thing you can see is that if I run this application here, right, then you have this tab here, Android Monitor. You can go into it here, and you can select here your emulator device. Normally, it will list you all the devices right now that are connected. So right now, this is the emulator that's running on the other window, I believe, here, which is running here. So I'm going to bring this guy back. No, actually, I'm going to leave it here for lack of space. But so this is the emulator right now running here, right? So I'm going to, like, let's say, click here to generate that log information. I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to show you here. So you can see here, this is the log statement that we had added. This is a log for the page number, and you can see that the page number here is 3. So this is a very simple example, but it kind of gives you the idea of like if you wanted to look at, inspect a bit more old school fashion, the value, and trust me that this does actually come in handy more often than not, that you could actually very easily just print it and then you can visualize the data in this logger. Obviously, you can also take this one step further. You could have some options here where you can add filter conditions. And if you wanted to look for something very specific, let's say, so something specific here would be maybe this class name page fragment. In that case, what you could do is, depending on your level of how you've configured your logging format, here, for example, we are printing out also the class name. So if you just put in page fragment here, then you could very easily, you know, just drill down and narrow down onto your log statements. So this was like a whirlwind, you know, a very quick tour of what debugging, how you can debug your app, and at a very, you know, high level. So I hope that it's kind of maybe give you some kind of idea So how you could like maybe troubleshoot the problems that you're having. Okay, so I don't know if this kind of like answers your question, Matt, in terms of debug expectations. Is this like kind of what you were kind of expecting? I don't know if this kind of answers your question. Okay, great. Well, glad if it's answering your question. Okay, so just to quickly recap, right? You will find yourself sometimes wondering why is it not stopping. Just make sure that don't hesitate to like put breakpoints maybe at a higher level and make sure that your debugger is connected. Okay, and then generally speaking, sometimes it's or the debugging connection was lost, or simply that you're too low. You're at a different point in the call stack, and the action has already occurred, and you're actually somewhere else where the code path was never invoked. If that makes sense. So yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to quit the emulator for the time being here. Okay, I'm back to. All right, so where were we in terms of questions here? Celia, okay, I'm glad if you're getting useful information. That's the whole point. So that's fantastic if you are getting information. So did I miss some? Oh yes, I had missed a question from Barinda, and I'm sorry about that. Sorry, Barinda, what was your question? Wait, let me, if you don't mind, maybe reposting it. I'm just trying to look for it. Wait, where was it? I just did Barinda. Where was it? How about an overview for? Oh yes, hey, yes, Miranda, if you have could you, if you just don't mind putting your question again? Yes, Toma, I will come back to it. Definitely, I'm not forgetting that. I'm working on my tour guide app project, and I have 2 questions. Okay. All right. So the clipping and the for, yes, I recall this now. Yes, apologies for yes for not. I'm gonna try my best to get to you on it. So you want to display the 4 main buttons, okay? And is it possible for you to maybe show me a link to your GitHub so I can like maybe check out the code and then have a look at it? So I think that would be easier. I personally haven't like used that much the clipping of the views and stuff like that, but I'm more than happy to have a look with you right now. But can you give me some kind of code as to why? Oh yes, there's, okay. Let me download this. Let me download this here. Okay. Cool. So let me. Okay, cool. So let me go here quickly, and let me open this other app. So this was in test. Okay. So let me run this to see. So let me first tackle maybe your second question, because maybe I would be able to answer that one maybe a bit quicker than the other one about clipping, and then maybe I could come back to the first one. I want to display these 4 main buttons: hotel, monument, eating, and okay, with an elevation attribute, but I've created the background buttons with rounded corners, specified background, and then I can see the elevation of the preview. Okay. So the second question is, I would like to add 3 image buttons to each view. Okay. Now, so let me see what these. Oh, this is nice. This is cool. So if I click here, this is going to monuments, hotels. Okay, just want to make sure that I'm following also in terms of I would like to add 3 image buttons. Okay, like that. Okay, fair enough. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm guessing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but and please correct me if I'm wrong in the Slack, but I'm guessing you want to put 3 buttons right here, right? In this, like in this hotels view, for example. And maybe potentially also for the cinemas, I'm guessing also, or eating and drinking. Okay, so hotels, right? So when we click on the hotels, you will have, I'm just quickly checking on the channel. Yes, awesome. Okay, cool. So yes, sure, let's have a look here. So hotel, so this is the main activity. So let me open your main activity here, layout. So activity main, I'm guessing this is the one. So I'm just gonna park this emulator on a separate window so that we have a bit more space. And I'm gonna park this guy too on a separate workspace. There you go. Okay, so hotels. Hotels. So this is a cinema, theater, and you have the hotels here. So this is the main button right here. That is fine. And element list item. So list item, I think that this is your, okay, and your drawables, are they here? So for example, let me do this, right? Let me find, let's say, you wanted to have, let's say, a location icon. Okay, so, and like a web icon. Okay, so let me go into here. Location icon. So here, what you would do, right, typically is that you would look for a location icon. So I just hope it's like one of these Creative Commons icons. And let me just download this one, for example, and new file. Okay, maybe not this one. Is this? Okay, cool. So let me just comments Wikimedia. So let's say I'm going to copy this file. I'm going to save this image, and so yeah, short list item. Yeah, that's where you want to. So this is going to be my location PNG. So I'm going to just put this into the desktop here. Okay. And then I'm just going to go and, so I'm going to go into the drawable here. So I'm going to go and maybe, let's say, put this in this location, let's say, for the time being. So actually, I'm going to put this in the drawable. That would be much better, I think. So I'm going to go into drawable here. Okay. So I'm just going to test. I'm going to go into app. Okay, so normally it should be here. And okay, location, it's here. Now what I'm going to do is typically, if I look at this design here, so now the question becomes here, right, that what is the best kind of layout you want to choose here, right? So what you went for is typically a linear layout, right? Horizontal. So which makes sense, right? Because you want to show elements in a horizontal manner. Now the question, the difficulty that I'm guessing you're having is the placement, right? So this is where some new layouts exist that could maybe be a better fit for you to explore, to be able to have that more fine-tuned, layout. Now, one possibility here, if I didn't make too many changes to what you're doing, I can see that if I go into your text here, right, you just created a linear layout here with a vertical linear layout right here, okay? So one other way of doing things would be, for example, you could create another linear layout here, for example, I'm guessing, right? And you could just say wrap content and wrap content here. And the orientation of this would be the same as horizontal, because what you wanted to do was you wanted to put the three buttons like side by side, right? So at this point here, then what I could do is that I could just look up, for example, image button here, right? And then I could just put that image button in here, right? And here I'm going to look for location PNG. I'm guessing this is the one. And I would just resize this to be smaller. So I don't know why it's done it so big, but I'm guessing it's the resolution of the image. Initially, that's way too big. So I guess that doesn't really matter. So let's say if we run this, for example, let's say, so I created another linear layout here. And if we ran this, so I'm going to go back to so of course here is just like a black square, but you would have your first button here, right? Which would be the location. And let's say, hypothetically speaking, you would want to add the next one. You would then be able to, sorry, let me go back to the code here. You'd be able to continue like on the same process here. You could add another image button here, but maybe you could like put in a spacing here. Or you could here, rather than doing a linear layout, you could maybe add just here a grid layout and specify 3 columns, which will enable you to maybe select in a more elegant manner the padding between elements. So let me just, like, for example, duplicate these 3 buttons to replicate what you want to do. And I'm just gonna say image button 1 here, and then I'm gonna put image button 2 here, and then I'm going to put image button 3 here for the sake of argument. So the grid layout, you have to like specify, I believe, the column count and the row count. So here I'm going to say column count, I want 3 columns, and row count, I just want 1. So I'm going to say column count and row count. And then, for example, you have to then specify where each element lives. So obviously all of these guys are going to be on the same row because there's only one row, so it's going to be row 0. I think the numbering also starts with 0 here, so I'm going to put all of them on the same row. However, the column, of course, is going to be different. So layout column, this one is going to be in the first column, and the next one is going to be in the so the next one is going to be in the second column, and then this guy is going to be in the third column, right? And hopefully this should actually give you a bit. Actually, I'm going to do something else too. I'm going to add a padding now, so that this padding is applied to all of the cells, right? So this would be maybe a bit more. This is going to be applied. Padding is going to be applied to all the elements within the cells. So this padding is going to be applicable to all of the cells. So naturally, all the cells will get a padding give a bit more space. So this one is not showing me a space. Maybe I haven't put enough, enough space between the elements. So 0, column 2, and column and orientation. So padding. So let me see if I put a padding actually here. No, this is not, no, the padding should be in the grid layout. So I don't think there's any horizontal orientation concept here. So let me just increase maybe the padding here a bit. So let me just, for the time being, try 2 buttons here. And if I put this in the 3rd column, I'm just wondering if it's not a problem due to just the way I've used the grid layout here. Hotels. I think there's some kind of problem because I think that the elements are just appearing next to each other. But I'm guessing that like this should kind of give you an idea of how you maybe do this. Does that help? Oh, sorry, my bad. You just added those 3 buttons. Oh, you've added them in your, okay, let me, sorry about that. I should have looked at it a bit earlier. So let me just actually pull, I'm actually pulling your changes. Oh, wait, hold on. I'm not, you're giving me, can you give me a, okay. You've added those 3 buttons. Are they already in there? Like, are they already in the, in your code base? Sorry. Sorry, you need to copy and paste into the list item. Okay, so I'm guessing that you just, these are the image buttons you're talking about, not, and like not images that you just added. So let me try that quickly here. If I just do this, here I would have to put the row count. So column count, row count, column count, layout column, 0, one, and 2. Run this. Oh crap! Did I update this in the wrong place? No, it seems fine. I think I did update the right file. Yeah, I did. So that should be fine. Is, oh, it's not it's ID here. Right, I think I might have maybe made something here. So I think I'm here on this screen. So yeah, so I think that earlier my column count, there was an issue by using the rows because there was only one row. So I think that was creating a problem. So I think this is kind of like what you're looking for, but I think that you just need to use a PNG to have that transparent background here, or you could potentially maybe enforce that in the code. But I think your asset would still need to have been PNG because PNG handles transparency for you. So I hope that kind of helps. Does that help, Liu? I can maybe just send you this layout here, maybe. There you go. Okay. So regarding your other question, the clipping part, I'm not too familiar with this, but you're saying that your first question was, I want to display those. So, sorry, your first question, did you find a solution to it already with your custom outline? No, that's your question, right? So how do I know how and where should I define a custom outline for a view? I'm not too familiar with this. So if you don't mind, I'll pass on this question because it's like more UI related than maybe some core questions that other people might have for the core of the libraries for the project. But I will eventually come back to this, and if not, I can always PM you and try to find a solution maybe later on after the session. Okay. How can I add the location button, which redirect user to the Google Maps? How can I add the location button which redirect users to the Google Maps site? So, oh, right. Okay, I see what you mean. Right. So you basically want if we were, oops. Okay. So basically on the icon. So once the person is clicking, and this will be interesting for other people to figure out how you'd like to basically trigger. So if I'm understanding you correctly, Brenda, you basically want to say, hey, if I was here and then when I click on this button right here, this should open maybe Google Maps and get the information and show this hotel on Google Maps, right? If I'm following you, is that what you're asking for? Yeah, sure. Makes sense. So this was a question that I believe also one of the students asked yesterday, and that was it was in relation to beacon technology. Well, you see, one of your, and this is an interesting question for everyone, so I'm happy to talk a bit about it because it's interesting, and it will also like kind of show you, like, depending on how nice your model was or the things you decided to put into it. So Verinda, to your question, right, obviously what you're implying at this point, right, is that you would have that information here, right? So if I quickly go back to, oh man, oh shoot, I think I yes, I deleted that requirement file that we had made yesterday, unfortunately. Why did I do that? Okay, so never mind. Basically, the question is, depending on your model, right? My question would be to you is that two things, right? Obviously, you would have to go and find out the GPS location of this hotel, right? You would need to have location, and then you could just call the Maps application with those GPS coordinates, and it would automatically put you on the map. The other thing, the way the maps works, is that you don't maybe need the GPS location. You could just maybe, let's say, so let me do this, right? Let me kind of like maps. Here, right? And look for this hotel, Columbus Hotel, right? And so I'm just going to move this guy again to some other place. And this also. So you could or get this now. Okay, I'm not sure if it's this one, but let's say for sake of example that it is this one, okay? And you could like maybe get some information here in terms of like, what is, oh, this is in Spanish too now. Awesome. So this is to print, and this is the distance. So I think that you would need to find some kind of link to this hotel in Google Maps. So if not the latitude, you need to find like what is like the information from a Google Maps point of view. So maybe this URL actually is already giving you all this information, right? So you can see this latitude information here. So maybe you could just actually save this URL, right? So I've just copied this URL of this hotel, and if it might not be this hotel, so never mind. Let's pretend that this was the hotel we're talking about. So my question to you would be then at this point, when you are, using the list, setting the list item here, right? So the list item is being called in your adapter, maybe is here. Is it in this one? So yeah, you're using your layout, you're inflating your layout here, list item view, right? And get view. So, and this is the elements adapter, right? So absolutely. So this is the list item view, and this is where you're setting all of your icons, I'm guessing also there. There you go, right? So basically what you should be doing here, right, is that be needing to specify in, so you need to add a listener here, right? So here your image view, so let's say that so this is the phone, set image resource, address text icon view and image resource. Sorry, hotels activity, right? And this is all the different hotels. So for example, your elements here, right? You could augment your elements here, and maybe you could, so let's say it was this Columbus Hotel, right? So you could potentially now go and add in elements here, go add in elements here, a new parameter, for example, and this parameter, first of all, would be a string, and this would be your, your URL location, right? Sorry, your map location, for example, right? And this is a string, and the default value, just so that it doesn't fail compilation, I'm going to put empty string. So now everywhere there's going to be an empty string here, okay? And for the Columbus Hotel here, the example that I took was this guy right here, right? So I'm going to like So this is let's say the URL, right, of your map. So now you have this information in the elements here. Okay, that's one thing. I'm just trying to discover this at the same time, understanding the flow a bit of how things are going to be moving. And I'm just going to quickly check if there's anything said here. Okay, nothing said. Nothing for the time being. Maybe I'm on track. So new elements, that's fine. So we've added this concept of also now a map location, and this will give you the full location. So now when we're going to be showing the hotels activity, so when we click the hotels activity, we come here, you have this elements adapter, okay, and you provide the elements adapter this list of the hotels you have, right? That is fine. And in the adapter here, right, the get view is returning each element, right? And you're inflating the list item view now, and you are, so what I don't understand here though is, oh, of course, yes, because you're not, for the time being, yes, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm following this correctly, absolutely. So now what you would have to do, right, you would have to get a reference to this image button. So I'm just going to do the example of the first one, but obviously you can replicate this, right? So location here, image button, right? And ID is location. So what we're going to do here, right, is that you would have to like define, you'd have to define here an image location here, right? So we're going to have an image button here, right? And this is the location image button, okay? And we're going to import this, and you're going to say equal to image button, right? And then we're going to say list item view get view by ID, and we said that this was our ID location. Oops, not this location. Let me quickly go back to location. Okay, cool. So this is location, right? So this gives us the image button, right? And now on this image button, right, this is what we're going to do, right? You're going to say location image button set on click listener, right? So you want to like act on it as soon as someone clicks on it, right? So we're going to say new on click listener at this point. So when you click on it, what do you want to do? Well, basically, at this point, you want to have, so you already have the elements at this point, right? You would be able to retrieve as per the position, right? You would get access to the element inside it, right? So let me quickly go and change the elements class here a bit so that I can get a getter for this new parameter called map location, right? So I'm just going to bind now this new parameter here, map location, and I'm just going to add a getter here. So I'm going to go here and say getter and map location. Okay, cool. So I'm going to come back here. So in your adapter, obviously, you're already giving all the elements, and we have the position as per where we are in the scroll, right? So here, all you have to do is to get your elements. You can just say elements, so not current elements, but this is, okay, so you would have to then store this, the access to this element. So I'm not also an adapter. So because you're using an array adapter, it's actually a bit easier because you're setting this elements directly within the array adapter. So all you need to do basically is just say get item here, right? And you just say current this position here, right? So this will give you the elements that is there now. So now you can just retrieve the map location that we had set, right? And you can just say elements get map location. So now you have the value of that location. So now what you have to do is that you have to send a shared intent. You have to start a shared intent, and you want to call the maps application, right? So I'm not too familiar with how we're going to do this, but this could be fun. So let's do this. And so Android start map Google Map, right? And I think that the concept behind it, so if I recall correctly, is a shared intent that you have to send. So it's all by intent. That's how that's how the Android works in terms of sending in information and stuff like that. So you could just create maybe an intent here. And I think that it's you would need to first specify the the object. But now the intent would be that normally, I'm hoping that on the emulator that the maps application is, I mean, this intent is mapped with the maps application. So technically, you should be able to start directly. Yeah, we should be able to use this, simply put. And if we go back here, because we already have that URL, right, we're just going to parse that URL. I'm going to parse that map location here. So the URL, so that will be transformed into a URI. And apparently, when we use that intent action view and we give it its URI, then because it has maps.google in it, I believe that this will give the ability to also have the the maps application to pop up, and we'll be able to at that point start it. Now there's a little catch here, right? Because to be able to start this activity from the adapter, this might be a bit complicated. So what we might need to do is, if you're clicking it from the adapter, you should be able to do that. And to do so, we might need to be able to get access to the context. So if I did get context here, and I said start activity, maybe this should be sufficient to actually trigger this information. So let me just quickly try this out. So I think I had moved the emulator on screen 7. Go here. So I think it was this Columbus Hotel. So if we click here, this brings up Google Map. Yeah, I guess I'm going to, and hopefully it should, like, use that information. And I think that this is pointing us to at least the hotel's URL that I selected, maybe not the one that you wanted, but at least it's opening that one. So I hope that answers your question in terms of like how you would do that. So once again, like coming back to the example of yesterday when we were talking about the beacon technology, right? This is where it's really important for you guys to think about, interfaces and your model and of the information that you need to keep track of. And that's really all about your model. And for those who were not like following yesterday, sorry, go back to that video of the afternoon where I'm kind of explaining to you these, where I'm trying to explain to you like interfaces. How do you use interfaces to establish contracts? And really your problem is not about, knowing what kind of services someone gives you. Although you're writing maybe that service yourself, you should always think about contracts. Try to say, I'm a client and I'm a server and I have a client and I need to expose a well-defined API. And when you do that, you're going to be thinking about what are the data points that I need, right? So yeah. So and in the same way, just to like close on the topic, so I can maybe address some other questions. The point is that, as you saw, that we updated the elements POJO that Berinda was using here because that was her data model, right? The question is that this is a very fundamental thing because this is how you guys are going to be, modeling in your future applications. So you have to give a good thought about like, what are the elements you're going to be needing up front. And in the same way, if I may say, eventually when we would like to, let's say, do for the internet, the URL of the website and the Facebook page, the concept is going to be the same, right? We're going to come in and you're going to come in here, right? And we're going to maybe add now the website and things like that. So at that point, one of the problems that you're going to start running into, because you might have then string attraction web page, and then you'll have string, attraction Facebook page, whatever. So your list now will grow, right, of parameters, and that's a bad thing. And that's where I talk to you guys about the builder pattern, which will maybe reduce a bit the number of parameters. But my argument would be, even before looking into the builder pattern, you can see that map location, like even visually when you see the thing, right, even visually, you saw that the 3 buttons are part of a same group, right? So indirectly, when you guys are designing things like that, you should be thinking, well, if these 3 elements are part of the same group, maybe I should just scrap this whole thing altogether, and I should maybe create a new class called maybe attraction information, right? And then that would just encompass the three values. So within it, you'll be able to retrieve the GPS or the map location, the website, and the Facebook page. And then if you reason like that, then you can always maybe keep your code in check with 2 to 3 parameters, right? And you can so for example, here, name of element, address, phone. Yesterday, if you guys recall, if not, you can always go back into the video and see, we created an object of type attraction, right? Which was consolidating all of this information. So now your API, if you just remove all of this and you just take away all this information, you just introduce an object, a type of type attraction, then suddenly now you just have 3 parameters, and it's just much more cleaner, and it's just easier to think about these things in that way. Okay. All right. So I'll try to move on to maybe a next question. I hope that answered a bit what you were looking for, Brenda. And regarding your clipping thing, I'll try to come back to you on that. Okay. Okay. So I think Tomo had asked me a question about. I think the overview, yes, the overview. Okay. Toma, if you can just say, maybe if you don't mind giving me a little hint, exactly what specifically part you would like me to cover in terms of the overview, then I can be a bit more specific. Because I'm just conscious of time, and we've got a bit less than 45 minutes left. So I just want to make sure that I'm going to make the best use of it and try to give you the relevant information. So to all of you guys, right, just always remember, this rubric is very important, right? So it's right here. I'll just copy paste it again. Every project comes with its rubric, so please do look at it. And yeah, so we went through all the elements one by one, but I'm more than happy, Toma, if you can maybe give me a bit more color exactly to what I know you said that you'd like to understand how to maybe how we should structure. I think you were trying how we should structure the app in terms of maybe intents and how to navigate. Yeah, sure, Ryoka-san. Well, you know what? Thanks for viewing and for asking your questions, right? And I hope it was helpful. So, see, the question becomes how would you be able to structure your application? I think that Brenda, the way she has structured it is very interesting. I think it was very neat what you've done. And by the way, Brenda, keep on going. That's really nice. And list using intents and multiple activities or a view pager. Okay, so using intents and multiple activities or a view pager. Okay, so sure. So let me take the example of. Sure. So let me take the example of. You're welcome, Brenda. So let me take the example of of this tab app that we were using, the example that we were working on together, right? So, oh, just one thing I'd like to show you guys. Wait, let me share my screen again. I don't know if for some reason I lost. I hope you guys were seeing that. Yeah, cool. So one other thing I was really, if you guys look here, one thing that's very, very useful is the following. When you're in Android Studio, you can click on File, and you can say New Project here. My friend Jose, the other session leader, showed me this today, and this is really, really, really cool. You can actually also import directly a lot of samples directly of source code, for example. So you can just say import sample when you create a new project, and you have a lot of different already existing projects from which you can inspire yourself. And these were all actually these are, I think, are coming all from the link that I provided you earlier today, this morning, for the Google samples page. So they've completely, I think, integrated that link in an Android Studio, and you guys can actually go. And so if you're looking for tabbed scrolling and stuff like that, then you could get some boilerplate code directly and can kind of figure out exactly how does that work by these simple examples. So this is pretty neat, right? So I'm just going to show you this again, right? You're going to File, New Project, right? But you don't select New Project, you just come into here. So File, New, Import Sample here, right? And then this will go and collect all the sample information that exists on different type of concepts like camera and connectivity and stuff like that. And you can just like, use this stuff, these sample codes. And I think that you'll find a lot of help with this. So for example, one of the samples that I was looking at a bit earlier today was the one for tabbed lists. So I used the one that was a bit more simpler because I just wanted to focus on the fragment part of it. But if you look at this one, if you look at this project basically, so I'm just going to move this onto a new space, and if we just run this, well, you'll see that this is a pretty some nice effects and tabs, and you could potentially inspire yourself from this code and implement these features in your own application. So you see, like, this is a view pager, and you can actually like just scroll, like, so if you want to show a lot of things, right? So maybe like if you guys had a lot of attractions, maybe like 10 attractions, then maybe you could, like, rather than using a tab, the other tab system that I showed you, maybe this one would be more appropriate. And then you could just like, scroll between all these elements, and you can see that dynamically, this is changing. And as you change this, potentially you could maybe, update the upper part of this with the image of the attraction that you want to show. So it's something just I wanted to show you because I found that's very helpful and very neat that you could just get the sample straight in from Android Studio. Okay, so back to the question that Toma was asking in terms of also like list activities. So for example, if we work on this sample, right, of so I'm quickly going to cool. So using intent and multiple activities in a view pager. Okay, so your so this was like one of the basic examples that we started building today to understand better the fragments. So now what you could do, right, Toma, for example, is that here, because we're in the Eiffel part of this, now in this fragment, in this page fragment, obviously right now all the fragments are using the same fragment page class. But then, as I was showing to you yesterday, each fragment should normally have its own layout because that would be the purpose. In this scenario, we just had one page fragment, right, that was using all the tabs. So if I want to create that Eiffel, Eiffel fragment, so I would just create Eiffel fragment here, right? And this would extend fragment, right? And then I would create my, so to your question, like as you were saying that, can we using intents and multiple activities or view pager? Now, they're not like kind of related, right? Intents can be used in any scenario, regardless of activities or fragments or whatever, right? Intents are a mechanism to communicate between activities or to communicate with external applications, okay? So when you're using a fragment, what happens, specifically a view pager, what happens is that your main activity becomes, in this case here, is actually also a fragment activity. So when you look at app compact activity, in your mind, you should be thinking activity and fragment activity, basically, right? So it's both. It's app compact activity is both. So your main activity right now is a fragment activity, and the fragment activity, depending on the widgets that you're going to use, is going to remain constant. And actually, it is the fragments that are going to be destroyed and recreated, and destroyed and recreated. Okay. So now the main activities lifecycle is of course going to remain the activity lifecycle, but it will always remain there. Like right in this example that we were seeing here with the tabs here, the main activity actually never dies as per se. So I think I just turned on. Okay, no, there it is. So the main activity here is remaining constant. It's not being recycled. It's not being destroyed. What is being destroyed and recycled? Well, maybe not in this scenario because I just have created 3 tabs. So by default, what happens, this is a good thing to know actually also, the way that the view pager works, for example, is that by default, when it loads it, it will always create the fragments behind the scenes for the immediate fragments that come on the right and on the left-hand side of the current selected fragments are automatically created for you. This is for a performance reason, and it's all happening behind the scenes. So if I collect, because this tab has nothing on the left, there would be no fragment created. But because this is a selected tab, and there is a tab on the right, the Louvre right now page fragment has already been created. Although we haven't selected it, it has already been created. So in the same way, when we click here, the view pager will create. If this page fragment did not exist, it would recreate it. And now it has created a Latin Quarter page fragment. Now, when we come here, because now this is the one selected, and like I said to you, by default, the view pager creates the view pages on the left and right of the selected page. On the right, there's no more tabs, so it would keep in memory the Louvre page fragment, although now the Eiffel page fragment now has been destroyed. Okay, so this is something to keep in mind in terms of life cycle, and depending on what kind of loading mechanism or any kind of data you might be loading. Later on, you'll see as you progress through, you might be making network calls and things like that in your fragments. So this is something that you have to bear in mind, that it's not necessarily because you have just selected the first fragment that this fragment's data is not being actually run right now, or maybe network calls are being made and things like that. Okay, so this is something to note. So at this point, right, so if I wanted to show now, I'm showing the view, I'm using here a view pager, but now in the view pager, I can add my own specific custom, UI elements. So if I wanted to add now, like, let's say, the image of the Eiffel Tower, I could add an image view here and then add a description section and things like that, if that makes sense. Now, obviously, I can also add some more data above this view pager, because if I go back to the way we structured the main activities layout, the first element is immediately the tab layout with the view pager. So if I just wanted to be a bit more fancy, we could add an image view here to just say, to show like the name of our app or something like that, for example, with a nice image and things like that. Now, in terms of Eiffel fragments, so if I want to now use a custom fragment, like let's say this fragment now is going to give me, like, it's going to set up the whole, get item view and things like that. So where I'm going to be setting up the structure of the visual structure also of the fragment here. So I would have to override some of the key methods here. So let's go here. I'm just going to create these ones here. So on create and on create view. So I'm going to override these ones here on create. On create view. Excuse me. So this would now enable me to now also create now a custom layout for the Eiffel, Eiffel Tower layout, right? And then this Eiffel Tower layout, I would be able to put in like I showed you yesterday, like the image view and things like that, and I could just like put, the image of the Eiffel Tower here, and then I could maybe add here like another text view, another grid view, sorry, here, a grid layout. And the grid layout here, I could add my columns of name, address, and things like that, for example. Obviously, just like we saw in in Berenda's example, so by adding the more information here, I could put the links to the different elements, and then we could just open the maps and things like that. So that is like one thing, for example, in terms of structure with the view pager. Is there something else also you'd like me to touch on, Toma? I'm hoping the screen was still being shared and you guys can hear me. It looks like it's being shared, so. Fully answered your question, Toma. That's why I'm like, if you can like maybe a bit like ask something a bit more specific, then maybe I can just go focus on that and try to see if, or maybe I can code a small example. Sure. But I'm not sure if I'm fully answering your question, so I just want to make sure that, that at least you go back with something, and that you have some kind of meaningful information maybe to move forward, and some ideas. So is there something else I could maybe answer in terms of your question, in terms of maybe intents, or because one of the things that you guys must see, like, right, is like the view pager kind of alters your structure quite a lot, right? Because the moment you start using a view pager, it has to be done in a fragment activity. And when you're using that in a fragment activity, now your activity won't change that much, right? You won't go from one activity to the other, because a view pager now is like, um, creating your own custom classes, sure, but which type of custom classes? Sorry, because you can have adapter custom classes. You can have you can extend the views. You can do a lot of fancy things. So and if the others, for those that are listening, like if you have any questions, please, like, don't hesitate. Like, if you want any other clarifications, maybe more generally on Android, or something that you are not maybe still confused about, and if I can answer, I'll be more than happy to. Okay, so I hope I'm trying to, I hope I'm understanding your question correctly. And generally speaking, okay, so when I say custom class, when you say custom class, right? Let me see. Let me look. I'm gonna try to make an explanation. I hope that is gonna kind of answer your question, and then I'm gonna come back to the channel, and let me know if I'm kind of answering your question, or I'm missing the point. Okay, so let me try this. Okay, generally speaking, guys, when you're going to be working with Android, you don't, as per se, create any pure custom class out of from scratch, right? And like, no one does that. There are many existing class, like adapters and things like that, that already exist, right? So for example, what you might be doing, you're going to create your domain object, right? You're going to create a domain object like we had seen yesterday, and this is a custom class, because we're creating an object that corresponds to a concept of an attraction, right? And what is an attraction? So an attraction, for example, is, like we saw yesterday, is the name, that the attraction has a name, right? It has also an address, right? So I'm going to like push this a bit further with a more complex example. I'm going to create a concept of address, right? So this is coming back to one of the problems that we had with Ryoka-san had earlier, right? You see, like, there's already a class that's called address, as part of the Android SDK, but that's not the address that I wanted to create, right? I want to create another domain object that's my custom class, and that specifies an address, right? So I'm gonna create this address class, and this address, what can it have, right? This address has, for example, it has a street name, right? So street, for example, and then it can have also have a number, right? A street number, right? And then it has a number, it has a street, and what would it have also? It would have a zip code, right? It would have a zip code. And if we want to take this a bit further, we could say, well, it also has, let's say, the city, right? I mean, the city. Okay, so city, okay? And that would be it. So I could just create a constructor here, and just select all the parameters, and then just have my getters to get the values of this. So that's one thing, right? So I created my attraction, I've created my address, so I need to not forget to use the appropriate address class, which now it is, because they're both in the same package, so you don't need to do an import when classes are in the same package. And then one other concept would here was that I would add also here, what I was saying to Belinda earlier, is that I would have another class called attraction info here. Okay, and I'm not going to go into details of this class. I'm just going to create it. And what attraction info would have, right, is just simply what we were saying earlier, that it would have, it would have maps URL. It would have web page and the Facebook thing link, right? So once I have created this high level custom Pojo, so I've now cleanly really modeled my data, how it looks like, right? And obviously there would be also maybe a list of a list of string, and these are actually the image names for this attraction. So if you want to have multiple images for an attraction, show them in a gallery or something like that, then you just have a list of string names, right? And then obviously we would just like pretend that these got initialized, and we would have getters to get access to this information. Now this is your custom class that you've created, because this is your domain, or you can also call this a model if you want. Both words are interchangeable and sometimes in this, like when representing Pojos. And but like when you're coming to like a fragment class, then obviously you're going to be extending some core classes that are expected by the framework. So you have to extend specifically these classes and then provide the overrides that are important, right? Now, in a more classic application, what you can do is like you can create one activity, and then you can click a button on this activity, and that button will open another activity, and then the first activity will disappear and the other activity would appear, right? So that's one way of kind of navigating your application if you want to go from screen to screen, right? And in that case, the way it works is that you create your you create your activities, and then you can have like activity 1 here. You would have your activity 1 here, so main activity here, and then you would have, let's say, another activity here called detail activity. Now, main activity and detail activity, because we want to ensure compatibility with previous versions also of Android, would not extend the regular activity, which we would in normal, but it would extend app compact activity, right? So that's the one we would want. And in the same way, you would also extend the detail. For the detail activity, you would also extend app compact activity, right? So now when main activity would come up, then you would now be working with from just pure activities. There would be no fragments involved. So on create here, you would just set up your view here. So you would say, for example, set content view here, and obviously in your layout you would have the relevant layout for this main activity, and then you would set up. You would retrieve any buttons you might have, and then on a button you would set a listener and say, look, when you click on this button, I want you to start a new activity. So you would say start activity within that method. Now, if some of you want to see this, I mean, I think it's a bit basic. I think you've already seen this from your previous projects already at this point, but if not, I'm more than happy to show you how to do that. So that's from a pure activity point of view. Now, like I showed you, the moment you start adding view pagers, now the structure of your application is changing, because now you're moving from an activity-focused model to a fragment-focused model. Now, fragments are self-contained UI widgets, so they are going to be the fragments do not operate on their own. They need an outside container, which is a fragment activity, which handles their life cycle. So in this case, when using an app compact activity, by default now, the main activity has become a container for fragments and can handle fragments because it's now also a fragment activity. Now, the view pager, right, is designed to work with fragments specifically, and also handles the swiping and the sliding and the grouping of view pages pages. So specifically, it's also made to work in tandem with this new with the more preferred way of creating tabs, which is the tab layout. Now, when you're working with fragments now, so you have to now you have to look at each page, if you will, of your view pager, so which is actually a fragment, right, as a page on its own. So just like if I wanted to now have the Eiffel tab to show the Eiffel Tower information, I would create a dedicated fragment for it, and I would now have an Eiffel layout in which I would show the Eiffel Tower and everything, and I would bring. So, and when I would be providing to my view pager here, the get item here, then I would change this a bit here, and I would say if, I would say I would switch on, let's say, the position here, okay? And if the position was 1, sorry, if the position was 0, that means that this is the first tab. This is the Eiffel tab. This is the Eiffel tab, right? In this case, now because we're not working with activities, because the view pager needs fragments and the view pager is within the activity will just show everything, meaning the tab and the view pager, but the view pager needs a fragment to work correctly. So what we would need to do here now is I would just return the Eiffel, the Eiffel fragment here. So I would just say return new Eiffel fragment. And so this is expecting a v4 fragment. So maybe maybe this fragment. So you see, I haven't imported the v4 fragment. I've just imported not the support library fragment, but the regular fragment, which is incorrect. So I need to import the v4 fragment here. So if I go back here now, this will be happy. And then if this is not right now, I'm only supporting the case for the Eiffel fragment and not the and the other 2 tabs just remain how they are. I would just return this. The break, of course, is not needed because I'm just returning it here. Now, if I go into so if I just go into now, I'm just going to delete. I'm not going to delete this, but I'm just going to like maybe fix this. There you go. So I'm just going to go into the fragment activity here for the Eiffel fragment, and I could like very easily just now, show this. So I'm just going to go and get this here. So the Eiffel fragment here now would be similar to this, except that I just need to have and typically what would happen here now is that I would not use the fragment page. I would use my Eiffel layout here, right? And in this case, I would say this is the Eiffel fragment, right? And now if I just ran this, so I don't know, where did I put it? Okay, so there's some problem here. I think I missed. So I'm not creating this with new instance. So I have to go in here, and rather than saying new Eiffel fragment, I have to say Eiffel fragment new instance. I'm just going to say position +1. And when I'm going to run this, so I'm now working with activity. Self-contained, UI widgets, which is now, for example, an Eiffel, like the Eiffel Tower widget now, which is self-contained. And so these 2 now are using the Louvre and the Latin Quarter fragment here. But this one, so the code is incorrect because it should be saying Eiffel fragment, because that's what I put into its view layout setup. So at this point, to fix this, I'm going to move this back to some other workspace, and so I'm going to move this also to another workspace. There you go. Move this too. Okay, and so what's happened basically here is that because this position here was 0 here, it should have showed me. So I think that what's happening here is that the Eiffel layout, does it have, because the Eiffel layout might not have, I haven't. So the Eiffel layout is like here, it shows an image view. It doesn't have any text view. And it just makes me think that maybe it did not even pick up the new changes actually. So I need to go back here. I'm just going to quit this here. So the Eiffel fragment here is going to be, so this will not work in it because it doesn't, so this is why things are blowing up here, because these values don't exist in this Eiffel layout. So I'm still going to nevertheless add the same text view that was in the other layout, so that it's going to be easier for me to update it. So I'm going to add this one. So at this point, this image of the launcher should be shown, and I don't need the grid layout for the time being because I'm not showing anything in it. So technically what will happen, it'll be the Eiffel fragment 1 that will appear, and then there should be the Android droid image below. And if I just go here to confirm that, so that TV ID is still there, so I'll be able to set here Eiffel fragment, and then normally the droid should also show on this. So now what would happen is that this, and later on, if we created some other mechanism of navigation by adding maybe another tab that would open some other views, then what would happen is that I could just reuse this Eiffel fragment on its own. So for some reason, this is not picking up the Eiffel fragment, so I'm missing something in my code here. I don't know what that is. So if the Eiffel fragment is here, new instance. Oh, because look, so this is the joys of copy paste, right? So I'm returning a page fragment here, which I shouldn't be. This should be returning an Eiffel fragment. So this is Eiffel fragment, and this is Eiffel fragment, right? And this Eiffel fragment is going to get set with these values. Now I'm going to run this again. And you can see, like, now we have two different fragments. We have these two, which are using the default page fragment, so they're just showing the same content. And obviously, if we went to change and we change the page fragment, then the page fragment would impact both of these tabs. But the Eiffel fragment is now self-contained. It has its own layout, and it has its own sorry, no, it's using the same adapter, because the adapter is set on the view page or not on the fragment, but the fragment has its own layout, and we're defining that in the fragment itself, right? So later on, let's say now, Toma, if you wanted to, for example, add a navigation menu here for something else with lists and everything, well, the layout would include the new list view inside it, and then within your fragment, on the onCreate method, just like on an activity, you would set up your list views adapter, and you would get the data and everything, right? So that's basically how it would work. Does that like kind of answer your question? Like also maybe in terms of maybe how to maybe navigate and use things. Let me know. I can try to. We've got a couple more minutes left. Okay, sure. Let me see. Enzo is asking, is that okay in the structure? Well, the structure, no, you see, Enzo, I think there's just one slight confusion. So just look at, you don't have to create actually drawable directories, right? I think that maybe that was where the confusion is coming from. You don't have to create those directories. Let me look at my look at the cast, right? So by default, Android already is giving you these directories here, right? And these directories are suffixed with the Android norm of convention of density naming, okay? So you don't have to create extra drawable folders. What you need to do is just create your different resource files with their different densities, and with the same name for a given you put the different files with the different densities in these folders corresponding to the correct, density. So let's say one of your artifacts is called location PNG, for example, right? Location. So you would create, 1, 2, 3, 4, let's say 5. If you're doing these 5 densities, you would create 5 different files called location PNG, right? But those 5 different files, although they have the same name, they would have, different densities. And then you would copy the location.png file with the appropriate density in each of the corresponding folder. So then when you run automatically, so when you will run your app, Android automatically will first figure out what is the density of your current screen, right? And the screen on the of the device on which your app is running. Then, so let's say for the sake of argument, let's say your device has XX HDPI density, okay? Well, in that case, Android is designed to first go and look for all of the different resources that are referred into the code, to first look for the resources in this folder. So wherever in your code now, in your layouts, you'll be referring to location.png, it will first look for location.png in here. So when it will find your location.png in this folder, then it will just use that file, if that makes sense, right? So you don't have to go and create different drawables. You just drop, once you have created with that application, the files of different densities, you just go and paste them in the correct folder, and normally you should be good to go. I hope, Endo, that answers your question. You don't have to create the drawable folder on its own. Is made more for like custom resources, like images files that you want to like manipulate and things like that. Otherwise, you should just use the other existing folders that are created. Sure, Toma. I don't know. I'm not sure I really like answer your question properly. So I'm sorry about that. But like I had said, like initially, this format is it's a bit difficult to like be able to go in full-blown detailed explanation. So that's why, like, if you have more channeled and more narrow specific questions, it's just maybe easier to answer. So have a look at have a look on how fragments work, play around, make some applications based on fragments, and as you will write more applications, I'm sure you will find the feel of like when you should be using an activity, when you should be using a fragment, and in which scenario, for example. So we just got a couple more minutes left. I could potentially take one more question and try to maybe answer that, and if not, I would just at least in the meanwhile, I would definitely say that keep up the good work. Like, you guys are putting in a lot of effort in this, and I think it's awesome. I think you should definitely not you should definitely keep on going. And one thing I would definitely recommend all of you is that start thinking about, because I think even right now you're at the right stage where you can start making an app for yourself. Just you have to do these projects, which is important because these projects will gradually take you to more and more complex examples, showing you more and more features of Android. But nevertheless, there's nothing like building your own application for your own requirements, right? So I would highly recommend you to just think about any kind of application you could make for a hobby of yours, for maybe any kind of charity work you're doing, or working you're doing in your community, or for your school, for your workplace, for example. And just think about something that would be useful for you. I think this is a very important concept, right? You should not make an application just for the sake of making an application, besides the fact that when you're learning how to build something, but try to make something that will be useful for you, because you will know for sure that you will be using it at least on a daily basis. So it can be anything, right? But something that's going to solve a problem for you, even if never mind how simple it is, as long as it's solving something for you, right? So it could be a reminder app, it could be just a note-taking app, it could be anything, right? And then just start building that. And as you will learn more and more skills with these other projects that you're doing, then whenever you have time, you come back to your own project and you start implementing those features. So one of the great things, advantage of that, is that you're going to be repeating the things that you have learned. So that will just further help you soak in, the different things you learned. And also, you'll be just working on something that's going to be very personal to you. So I would definitely recommend you that you start now thinking about also making an app of yours. And whilst you're doing this, you're doing this course, you should also be doing then building your own app on the side. So I don't know if you guys are so if you still have any questions in terms of maybe. I think that we did cover quite a lot of things. On some parting thoughts, I would definitely say that code as much as you can and try to do as many examples as possible, and look at the sample projects that you can import in from Android Studio. And for those of you like who might be still a bit lost, maybe, well, then don't hesitate to reach out to the session leaders. But also don't hesitate to go on Amazon, for example, and then just like find a nice Android development book that is as latest as possible, and see if it has good reviews. And generally speaking, if it does, then just take the time and start going through the book and doing the exercises. But normally you shouldn't have to do that, because normally all of these exercises that are given to you by Udacity are pretty cool, and they bring you up to speed really in a gradual way. And one thing I would definitely emphasize on is that if you haven't understood a concept, don't just wave it and say it's fine. I mean, as long as it works, don't do that. Really try to get to the bottom of it. Try to get a clear explanation of, and try to make sure that you fully understand why something is happening. And one thing I will definitely tell you to do, and we just have a couple of minutes to do that. So I will show you something here that is very helpful. So in case you haven't done this previously, I would highly recommend you do that. When you are coding, when you're working on your app, you're most welcome, Luna. So one thing I would definitely recommend you to do is, and specifically, and Toma, this will be interesting for you, specifically if you guys are starting using fragments, because their life cycle activity is very different compared to an activity life cycle, because their life cycle of the fragment is very different. I would highly recommend that you start, when you override these methods like onCreate here, add a log statement here. Say log.info here, tag onCreate, right? And just add whatever tag makes sense to you, and replicate this for each method call here. So if I'm here in onCreate, I just replicate the method name here, okay? And then call this whatever. You can just even leave it just like that, because you will have anyways a name of the class, right? So you can just do that. And when you run this, like for example, when you run this application, when you're running your application and for some reason you don't understand why it's being made, or it's being made too early, or your data, is not being loaded correctly. And as you move on, you will see maybe the cursor loader project where you'll be starting interacting with databases and things like that. So you might see, why is my data not loading? One thing that'll be very interesting for you to see is that you'll be able to look for like onCreate here, for example, right? And so I'm just going to move this to another view here. And one thing that's going to be very useful for you is that if you have put in these log statements at the different points of the life cycles, triggers, then you would be very easily able to kind of see, okay, which was called first, which was called next. So you can see, for example, in this order, ABC, onCreate ABC was called first, and then onCreate view was called. And this actually logging will help you a lot understand, hey, you are thinking that maybe this X method was called before Y, but actually no, Y was called before and then X. And then that will kind of like even help you more understand better, the whole life cycle of things. And then that will actually help you a lot also to figure out why something is not working. So maybe some of you were already doing this just like naturally. And if for those of you who are not doing this, specifically when you start working with fragments, I would highly recommend you to go and get these log statements in the fragment. So like right now, I put this in the page fragment. You can actually also put in this in the main activity that has the view pager, for example, here, right? So whenever you overwrite anything, just put it in there. So that will help you, because if something's not working, you can always go into the log of the emulator or your device, and then you can just filter out on that specific, create statement, and you can see exactly in which order things are happening. Okay. All right, folks. Unfortunately, time is up, so we're going to be ending the session now. It was really great having you. I cannot encourage you enough and congratulate you enough for doing partaking in this hackathon, and also overall in this course where you're learning these awesome Android skills. You'll see that as your skill set grows, there is so much more to come in terms of all the awesome things you can do. But even whatever with what you have learned right now, you'll be able to do some really cool stuff. And I just cannot emphasize enough, just keep it up. Don't give up, right? Because you're at the hardest part. Once you're going to become comfortable with these basic concepts, I can guarantee you then the rest will just be very fun, because as you'll see, and that's what I'm saying, build your own app, because when you see something that's personal to you, that's growing with time, and you're adding more and more features, it'll be very, very rewarding. Okay? All right, folks. And keep it up. Take care. Bye-bye.